So how long do we have until the end of this one hits? Well, I can't say with certainty. I can't give you an exact date. But what we can say is that if the US was willing to take this move and expose just how weak US treasuries really are to the rest of the world and risk a more global sell-off that's incoming, then you have to ask yourself, how bad was the alternative? What would have happened if the US hadn't stepped in and a couple $100 billion of US treasuries hit the market? They know, that tells you that the US knows that the buyers are not there and we cannot afford more cost on our debt. The US isn't choosing between a good and a bad option. They're choosing which option they can afford to let break first. And to me, that is a signal of where we are today and where we're going next. Now, many people out there have no clue what's going on, which is by design. But if you're watching this video, chances are you see what's happening and you understand what's coming next.
The US government just posted its largest July deficit in history at negative $432 billion. The interest payments alone are now up to $118 billion, up over $20 billion from last month. We're about to pay over $1 trillion in interest alone for 2026. Interest payments have now surpassed defense spending and Medicare. In other words, the US spends more money on interest payments than the entire US military and also healthcare for all of its seniors.
The largest recession in history is happening in real time. Japan announced Friday that they were going to start selling off American debt, American bonds. And when this happens, the American dollar, it's already fragile. It's already at a breaking point, about to collapse. So what happened was America stepped in and said, we can't allow the American dollar to collapse. So what they're going to do is they're going to start throwing euros at it. And when they start buying American debt with euros, it's going to cause the euro to tumble and possibly collapse. This is the first domino in the Great Recession that is to come that will lead to a global depression.
Empires don't die in war. They die at the gas pump, and America's empire is dying right now. Hi, I'm Jeff, editor of Global Intelligence Letter and a financial writer for more than 30 years, 17 of those at the Wall Street Journal. Let me be clear at the outset. I am not bagging on America. I love my country, but you can love your country and still see clearly where it's slipping. For the 4 decades that I've lived as an adult, I've watched, studied, and reported on the levers that actually move power. And it is never the simple and obvious lever that the media focuses on. The news shows you the tanks, the battles, the rubble, diplomats diplomating. But the real power to shape tomorrow, that lives in the plumbing, in a bond, a shipping lane, a vault of gold quietly filling up on the other side of the world. And that's what we're seeing right now in America's struggles to finish the war with Iran. It's showing us in real time just how an empire actually dies, not on the battlefield, but with an accounting decision. Look at 1956. Britain and France invade Egypt and take back the Suez Canal. And militarily, it's working. British troops have boots on the ground, and the canal is nearly theirs. But then Washington picked up the phone. President Eisenhower threatened to dump America's pile of British bonds, which would have collapsed the British pound. He also blocked Britain's emergency loan at the IMF. The next morning, Britain folded. It was clearly on the path to winning the battle, but it still had to surrender its century-old empire. Not one shot fired at a British soldier, just a threat to sell some paper. And notice why America did it. Not because America was hurting economically. America felt nothing. It moved because breaking Britain was cheap, and the prize was Britain's old job, top dog in the league table of the world's most powerful countries. That's the thing. The rising power never acts out of pain. It acts because the move is nearly free and basically painless. Now, 70 years later, America's sitting on the same throne Britain once controlled, and it's facing the same comeuppance. Back in February, America went to war with Iran, as everyone knows. Killed the supreme leader, blockaded the ports, owned the sky. But then, it couldn't deliver the knockout punch, because finishing off Iran, meaning following through with Donald Trump's original mission, meant boots on the ground, and the public had already run the numbers at the gas pump, And they said, nope, not today. 86% of Americans blamed the war for prices that have been bleeding their paychecks. And when pollsters asked who would back a ground war to end it, 7% said go for it. 7. Whatever the opposite of mandate is, that's 7%. Nobody coerced America into quitting, which is the unsettling part. America simply published the exact price at which it walks away from a war it started. And for America, that price turned out to be about $4.50 for a gallon of gas, $6 if you live in California. Every leader in the world wrote that number down, particularly the leaders in Beijing who are hell-bent on taking Taiwan one day, sooner rather than later. Americans expect that the fight with China over Taiwan means a big and nasty bang-bang kind of war, carriers, missiles, a ground invasion of the island. That, however, is a game of chess, capture the king. China's game isn't chess, it's Go, where the point isn't checkmate, but rather creating a position, one stone at a time, that leaves your opponent realizing that his best move is simply to just walk away before the fight really begins. The stones China is moving include one that rhymes historically with 1956. China holds a lot of American debt. Now, forget the cartoonish ideal where Beijing just dumps all of its debt and crashes the U.S. economy overnight. That's not the play, because America isn't Britain 1956. Britain was cornered in a way America isn't. Britain had pledged to hold the British pound at a fixed exchange rate, and defending that peg required oodles of dollars in gold reserves that Britain was rapidly running out of. Today, America prints the world's reserve currency, so if China dumps U.S. treasuries, the Federal Reserve just conjures up more dollars and buys whatever China sells. The overnight kill switch doesn't work on the U.S. the way it worked on Britain. China knows this, however, so it's following a path more lethal to the U.S. It's just leaving. It's quietly stepping back as a buyer of American debt and letting America's $39 trillion debt bomb do to America what war might have accomplished in the past. Because here's the trap. When the world's biggest lenders walk away, someone still has to buy the mountain of bonds America needs to sell every year just to keep the lights on. That someone ultimately is the Federal Reserve printing fresh dollars to buy debt nobody else wants. And every one of those newly printed dollars lands as inflation on your gas tank, your grocery bill, that mortgage you want for the new house. China doesn't have to fire a single shot. It just stops lending and lets America poison itself by reaching for the only antidote it has left, monetizing its debt to a ruinous degree. And Beijing? It's holding an umbrella. Tons of gold stacked deliberately for years as it backed away from the dollar, which will be climbing in value as the dollar sinks. So, just as America felt no real pain throwing the British Empire under the bus 70 years ago, China would feel far less pain than most imagine doing the same to America today. Which leaves us asking the only question that counts. What's the number? What price, at the pump, at the mortgage desk, on the checkout screen at Walmart and Target, is the one where Americans discovers there's nothing left they're willing to fight for, because the bills are attacking their wallet and that pain is simply too great? Beijing is already calculating that number. And my bet, Beijing thinks it can take Taiwan whenever it likes, because Iran taught the world that America has the stomach to start a war, but not the financial tolerance to finish one.
Donald Trump can wipe out our national debt of $36 trillion with a simple accounting maneuver. Currently, the Treasury is recognizing gold at $42.22 an ounce. But if Donald Trump conducts a gold reclassification to present market value, that is now $3,000 per ounce. And all that would happen is the Treasury would issue a gold certificate to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve would issue almost $800 billion to the Treasury itself. That is not a loan. That is not a tax cut. There's no interest on that. It's just money free and clear by just recategorizing what the market value is of gold. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because Donald Trump, in theory, with the help of Congress, could reclassify gold at, say, $72,000 an ounce, which would give us $18 trillion, money out of thin air, by the way. Or, check this out, if he reclassifies gold at $144,000 per ounce, well, folks, that is roughly $36 trillion of reclassification Simple accounting.
Turkey is selling its gold, real gold bars, straight out of its central bank vault. And they are not doing it to fund a war. They are not doing it to save their currency. They are doing it to buy diesel. And it's not a Turkey problem, because before Turkey touched its gold, it quietly sold something else. It sold American government debt, the US Treasuries. 90% of everything it held was gone in a single month. And once you understand why, you will see that Turkey was never the story. Turkey is the first crack in something much, much bigger. Here is the secret this whole system is built on. When a country buys US Treasuries, it believes it owns the safest asset on earth. But that safety depends on one quiet assumption, that when you want your money back, someone will be there to buy it from you. So what happens when every buyer becomes a seller at the same time? It started with the Strait of Hormuz. 1/5 of the world's oil passes through that narrow strip of water. When it choked, oil prices jumped. And every country that imports oil suddenly needed dollars fast. So they sold the one thing they could sell instantly, their US Treasuries. But every sale pushed the price down. Every drop made the next country nervous. Selling created fear, and fear created more selling. We already know where this road ends because it happened in 2022. Sri Lanka ran out of dollars. Its reserves fell from 7 billion to almost nothing. The fuel lines stretched for miles. The power went out for hours every day, and the president fled his own country in the middle of the night. Now watch what America is doing about it. First, they are draining their emergency oil reserve at the fastest pace in history and shipping most of it overseas. Second, they lifted sanctions on Russian oil, and they did it twice, right in the middle of a war. So why would America help its enemy sell oil? Because cheaper oil means fewer countries are forced to sell treasuries. America is burning its own emergency reserves to protect the market its entire power is built on. If the system were fine, none of that would be necessary. Because here is the endgame. If enough countries are forced to sell, America's borrowing costs will rise past the level it can afford, and then there will only be two choices left. Either default on the debt or print the money. Rome faced that choice. Imperial China faced it. The British Empire also faced it. And every single one of them chose to print. And each time, the people holding the paper paid the price. So the real question is not whether the next domino falls. The question is which country runs dry first. And right now, nobody is further down that road than Turkey. Save this video. Because the day one economy collapses, this stops being a theory. It becomes the news.